Hello everyone, my name is Xander Tabler. I'm going to be talking to you all about moral dilemmas and critical thinking today. This is more of an in-person presentation normally, and there's a lot of discussion based, so it'll be very quick to run through now, but I would love to be able to present or have you present this later. So on our next slide is all my contact information in case you want to learn more about critical thinking and moral dilemmas, as well as just like ethical decision making overall. This presentation is going to be broken down in a few parts. So we just did our introduction, now you all know me, and we'll be going into what ideas are of critical thinking in leadership, as well as doing a moral dilemma activity. Again, very hard to do it over this, but I'm going to explain what it is and what the point of it all is for us. Then we'll go on to what theory this is grounded in the moral development theory section, and then we'll have a bit of self-reflection, and then there's another scenarios that I'll explain to you all and let you all know exactly what it would be like if we were doing this in person. So to start us off, critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Most people have a general understanding of what it is in their head, but don't really have a definition for it. So here's the definition that we're going to be working from for the rest of this, which is that critical thinking refers to the ability to analyze information objectively and make a reasoned judgment. This skill comes up in a lot of different positions in a lot of different ways, because being able to make what in our minds is an objective decision is really important. But as we go on through this, we're going to be talking more about what exactly is objectivity and how even in our own minds we bring in our biases, and every decision that we try to make is still subjective in some way. But trying to get down to the bare bones of what the decision is going to be and knowing what our biases are will help us to make a better objective decision. It's also important to define what leader and leadership are for us. So leader is an individual and role-based idea, and it reflects individual actions. And so a leader would be, say, President Barack Obama would be what we describe as a leader because of the role that they are put in. Whereas leadership, on the other hand, is like a collective process, and it's a shared goal and vision between all of us. And it looks beyond the formal authority that comes with a position. So, we're going to be going through an activity in the application. So applying these concepts to scenarios, there will be a couple groups normally, but for my last one there was one large group because there wasn't as many of us. But I'd like to stick to groups of like 4 to 8 is usually what I work with. And I'd be giving out a card to each one of you that has a description of who you are, based on your age, your work, all these other ideas. And eventually I would give you this scenario. So there's this moral dilemma activity. You and the other people in your group are on an awesome cruise in the Bahamas. The cruise ships take a turn to the Bermuda Triangle, and only so many of you will fit on a lifeboat and be able to be saved. The other people will certainly die. And your mission during this was to decide who is going to be able to fit on the lifeboat and who's going to have to stay behind. So the cards that I give have a little bit of information that you share with the rest of the group, and there's also some about just like you as a person in this activity that only you know. So some of it could be like good things like, oh, I'm trying to get back to my kids, I have like this big responsibility, but I'm not going to say that in front of everybody else to like sway their decisions. But some people's could be something like that they're feeling guilty about. And so the idea of this is to start going through, and everybody in the groups would be discussing, okay, this is who I am, and this is why I am giving my idea of why I should be on the lifeboat. And so you're making these decisions based on what knowledge you have and not all of the knowledge completely. And so this kind of puts you in that subjective area, and as you're trying to make the objective decisions, you are making it based on these biases that you have. So one of the people that usually makes it onto the lifeboat is there's a doctor who is terminally ill, but he saves so many lives per week, and people base these decisions based on, okay, if this person's going to save other people, that is a value that I appreciate, so I'm going to put them on the lifeboat. Whereas there's other people that maybe their careers aren't as lucrative or as helpful to everyone overall, or there's people that are older and you start putting a value on amount of life lived based on like potential. And it's really interesting to see how people go through this decision-making process, and it's really where we start with to go into the idea of what is our morality and what makes something objective versus subjective. So then we hop into a discussion quickly after that. So if you wanted to do this with another group, or if you wanted to do this with like even just a group of friends, I would stop on that one after creating all the characters and let everybody start running through it. But afterwards, it's important to sit down and really start diving into it. Like, what were the most important factors to your decision of who got to stay on the boat and who had to stay on the boat and who got to go into the lifeboat, and also why were those decisions made and who in the group was able to start making those decisions. And you can start looking at leadership as in who took leadership in those groups. Was there some formal leadership? Were you doing this with a staff and the supervisor started doing like making the decisions and being the main speaker for the group, or were you sitting there and one friend automatically took the informal leadership role upon themselves? And it's really interesting to start diving into the group dynamics of it. Next, we dive into the moral development theory. So the moral development theory that we base this on is Kohlberg's theory from 1981. This is a moral development theory, but it's used a lot in student development, and especially in higher education and student affairs. And so it goes through these different 6 steps of morality and how we come up with what morality is to us. So with morality, it starts out basically with, I'm not going to do these things because I will be punished, or even I will do these things because I get a reward. And it's based around what it personally does for you. And as you go down these steps, you start to look at it more as a social system, and you see what is good versus bad and moral versus right. And you see it outside of the context of the law. You see it outside of the context of what gets me further, or what gives me the things that I want, or keeps me away from the things that I don't want, like punishment. And eventually you end up on this step of morality of universalizable, reversible, and prescriptive general ethical principles. And so it gets you to this idea of, okay, morality is what we as a group have like established, and what is like our own morality. And so some people, when we start talking about this, based on the last one, they said that their morality was based around, okay, what is going to be what is going to give the most collective good back to the world based on who we send back on the lifeboat. And so that idea of what your area of morality is can be seen through these different stages of moral development. Then we go into a little self-reflection. We have a worksheet that I can send to you again if you email me and are interested in it. It just goes into like, what were these things outside of the group? How did you go through all this moral development, and how, like, where do you think you get your idea of what is moral versus what is not? Are you very strictly bound by, well, the law says this is wrong, so it's wrong? Or are you someone who is willing to bend what the rules are because you don't think the rules are moral and are created outside of that? And then you can also share this with other people, and it's really interesting to get a discussion going of where we draw the line of what's moral and right versus what's lawful. And it's just a really great discussion to have. Finally, we go into moral development scenarios. And so these are a lot of questions of things you've probably heard before, with like, if you have a friend who you would know is going to cheat on a test, and that you don't know if they're going to get caught or not, would you turn them in? And so it's something along those lines of, okay, do you turn them in because cheating is wrong? Or do you not turn them in because, they're really having a tough time with this. This might be the only way for them to get through this. It's not that big of a deal. Or a scenario of, you see someone a couple feet in front of you drop a $20 bill on the ground. Someone else comes along and picks it up, but they don't know whose it is, but you saw it all happen and you can chase them down. Do you let this person keep the $20, or do you inform them that, it's this person ahead of them's money? And it goes into that idea of like, how do we decide what we would do in those scenarios, and what makes it right or wrong based on our own idea of what is moral. So finally, that we would wrap that up with some just discussion around what is moral, what is not. And it's an important thing to reflect on, because as we go through life in different positions and different informal and formal areas of leadership, it's important to constantly reflect on what our biases are and what we're looking towards and what we believe is right and wrong, and also like how we make our decisions based on like this idea of what information we have and what information we place the most merit on, and so it's something to always keep in mind with just your implicit biases. And there's actually some implicit bias assessment tests through Harvard that you can look up. It's called the IAT, and it's also an interesting one to just see where your biases are towards or against groups of people, different like ideas, because it's always important to keep this in mind, because at some point maybe in time you'll be hiring people, you'll be supervising, and you don't want to be making these rash judgments and thinking that you are being objective. when in fact you're sitting here and making these because of the way that you have constructed your mind and your morals in the past. So it's always important to be reflective about all of that. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and please reach out if you would like to discuss this more, or if you would like to hear me present about this. Have a good one.